Dr. Ben Bikman, Male Infertility, Focus on the Insulin Resistance First, from the Metabolic Classroom on YouTube.
From our conversation last week, we spoke about polycystic ovarian syndrome and how insulin has a direct effect at inhibiting the ovary's ability in a woman of converting testosterone into estrogens. All estrogens, which is a family of hormones, were once testosterone. And then women just convert more of that than men do, but men, of course, convert some as well. I'd like to actually kind of start this conversation, this lesson, by focusing on the fat cell, because once again, I think we can start in the fat cell. And then depending on what's happening in the fat cell, we have those two consequences, those two pillars of male infertility, which is erectile dysfunction and low testosterone. Again, I think they're kind of derivative of a problem that starts in the fat cell. So let's just pick one. Let's start with erectile dysfunction, because there was a paper published, and this article that I'm thinking of right now was published in 2013, and the title of it is, and anyone could just go look up the title, it's Erectile Dysfunction May Be the First Clinical Sign of Insulin Resistance and Endothelial Dysfunction in Young Men. So that's a pretty compelling title for a scientific manuscript, because it's basically saying, if you have a patient who's complaining about erectile dysfunction, it's very likely that this is actually a problem of insulin resistance. Now, briefly, let's talk about how that connection works, and then we can get into low T. With erectile dysfunction, it's thought to be a problem of blood vessels that don't dilate well enough. So a normal erection only happens when those blood vessels dilate. And as they dilate, well, then the man has the erection that he's hoping for. If they cannot dilate and they stay constricted or narrowed, no erection, or certainly an inability to keep an erection. Part of the process of dilating that blood vessel, making the blood vessel get bigger and carry more blood, is the production of a molecule called nitric oxide. Yeah, so nitric oxide is so good at dilating blood vessels that if someone's having chest pain, the reason a physician will give the person a little nitroglycerin pill to put under their tongue is that nitroglycerin will be taken into the blood and converted into nitric oxide, opening all the blood vessels and easing the chest pain. Now, to take it back down to the erection, in the case of insulin resistance, when the endothelial cells, which are the cells that are lining the inside of the blood vessel. So if we were inside a blood vessel right now, as we were looking around the tube, we would see the endothelial cells. Those are the innermost lining of the blood vessels. The blood vessels, these endothelial cells, are what's making the nitric oxide, which then will allow the vessel to dilate. If the cells are insulin resistant if those endothelial cells become insulin resistant, they cannot produce as much nitric oxide. And so when there's a signal for those blood vessels to dilate, if there's insulin resistance, then they don't dilate, they stay constricted. So that's a direct effect of the insulin resistance compromising the ability of the blood vessels to make nitric oxide, which is then compromising the ability to either get or sustain an erection.
PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome. Insulin inhibits the ability of an ovary to convert testosterone into estrogens. All estrogens, a family of hormones, were once testosterone. Women convert more testosterone into estrogens than men. Let's start with the fat cell. Depending on what is happening in the fat cells, there are two pillars of male infertility: erectile dysfunction and low testosterone. Erectile dysfunction, from a 2013 published study, may be the first clinical sign of insulin resistance and endothelial dysfunction in young men. Dr. Bikman says, if you have a patient complaining of erectile dysfunction, it is very likely a problem of insulin resistance. Blood vessels that don't dilate well enough. This is required for normal erection. If the blood vessels do not dilate, no erection. Part of the process of making blood vessels dilate is a molecule called nitric oxide. It's so critical to dilation that nitroglycerin converts into nitric oxide to open blood vessels in a heart emergency. Endothelial cells line the inside of the blood vessel, and they make nitric oxide, which allows the vessel to dilate. If the endothelial cells are insulin resistant, they cannot produce enough nitric oxide. So when the signal comes to dilate, they stay restricted, therefore no erection.
Annotated, summarized, easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points.